Record. So go ahead and start us off.
Good morning, everybody. I am Barbara Ivins. I am talking to you today from Alameda County, where I am with the UC Benioff Children's Hospital, Oakland. And with Chandra and Brooke on this call with us today, we are together, my program and the Child Trauma Research Project and the Infant Parent Program, a consortium of 3 early childhood mental health programs in the Bay Area that have a grant from SAMHSA, the Federal Substance Abuse Mental Health Association, to really build an early childhood mental health workforce in 10 counties north of where we are. Chandra's in San Francisco, north of us. And so we are really, really happy to bring this webinar and have Chandra provide her time and her expertise with us today to talk about Trinka and Sam and COVID-19. So this grant is a 5-year grant. We have met many of you in your counties with a variety of trainings, but we just want you to know that we are around for a few more years. We are partnered with your first 5 directors in your counties, and we are continuing to offer a variety of trainings. Some of you, or many of you, I hope, are part of our email distribution list and can check our new Facebook page, 0 to 5 Workforce. If you are not part of our distribution list and you would like to be, you can use the private chat to me, Barbara Ivins, or to Brooke Kimbrough and send us your email address, and we will add you to our distribution list where you can hear about the trainings and the other things that we send out. So with that mini introduction, I want all of this time to go to Chandra, because we all have great things to learn from her. I've known Chandra for many years and I never stop learning from her. And Chandra, I really appreciate that you are with us this morning, and let me pass you the baton.
Great, thank you. And if you and Brooke want to put your emails in the chat for people, and also if you want to put the Facebook page for the grant, that would be great. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. And I'm hoping that I'll also be able to see some of you as I talk, because it's always nice to see your faces. And so I came today to really share a story that we wrote to support families through COVID called Trinka and Sam Fighting the Big Virus. And I just want to begin by acknowledging the organizations and my colleagues who support me. In particular, Barbara's already talked about our SAMHSA grant, but also the Irving Harris Foundation that's provided the funding for me to be able to deliver this webinar today. And just so you know, I think some of you mentioned that you also were disaster responders for fires and other kinds of traumas that your communities have experienced. That this is part of a larger series, and it's completely free. Over 300,000 copies have been disseminated worldwide. And you can download this story and all the other stories from piploproductions.com for free, as well as from the website of the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. So I just want to point you to the website so that if you find the story useful, you can go there, get the companion booklet, a parent guide, and there's a free poster if you haven't already accessed them. And they're currently available in English and Spanish and simplified Chinese. And we're getting them up in other languages as well. So my original plan in coming to be with you was to talk about coronavirus and to be able to share a resource for how a story can help. And that original plan seems, in some ways for me, it's still there, but I want to really begin by acknowledging the larger context, and by acknowledging the context of racism, and really that it's always been there, although we might not have always felt the pain in such a way. Some different people feel it differently. And it's been among us. And in some ways, when we think about COVID, it's a very interesting metaphor for the fact that we can be carriers and not know it. And so really wanting to acknowledge that it would be blind to not talk about one pandemic without acknowledging both pandemics, the pandemic of the virus and the pandemic of the virus of racism. And so I want to begin by doing that and by sharing a couple of basic frameworks for thinking about stress and trauma that I hope will be helpful to all of us. And then, because we did have an agreement to share the Trinka and Sam story, I will be sharing that. I'm going to focus on how we use it and think about it as adults. Because in work with infant mental health, we know that you have to support caregivers so that they can support children. So we always begin with ourselves and our understanding. And then we'll talk a little bit about tips for using it with children. And throughout this, I'm hoping that we will each be thinking about, and I'll be talking about, how the story helps us in general to think about stress and trauma, and how we can use lessons learned, whether we're thinking about COVID, family stress and trauma, if we're thinking about the impact of adverse childhood experiences, if we're thinking about adverse community experiences, and if we're thinking about historical trauma, which we often call the atrocious cultural experiences, the original ACEs. And so I just wanted to begin with this acknowledgement. And I also wanted to begin with what I call the ABCs of a trauma-informed response, where the A stands for acknowledge. And if you think about all the trauma lessons and knowledge that we've learned, it's odd that it could be jailed down to an ABCs. But acknowledge what we are going through, acknowledge what families are going through, acknowledge what communities have gone through and are going through and continue. And the B stands for breathe and bodies, because we know that it's hard to be present and to lean in and to make change without regulation. And we'll come back to the breath and to the body at other points in time, but I just wanted to name the ABCs. And the C stands for connect. And the first way that I want to show kind of how we might make a connection is by sharing what we call the child-parent psychotherapy triangle from our treatment model. And if we think about the triangle, on the right-hand side of the triangle, we're going to start off by thinking about behaviors and feelings. And if you're looking at it, you can think about these are the things that often bring us down. What is happening? What children are showing us, what we may be feeling. And on the left-hand side, just think about experience as a path. What is it that brought us here? What is the experience? So that when you connect experience to behaviors, you're building a bridge. And I would call that a bridge to understanding, where they really sync up and you say, yeah, this makes sense, this behavior and this feelings that I'm seeing or that I'm having. On the bottom, we would put what's our plan? How do we help you? And all around this, we would put protective steps and hope. What are the good and true things that families are doing, that maybe communities are doing, and that we are leaning into? And I hope that this is helpful as we think about the story and also as we think about the larger sociocultural context.
We have the building under
Oh, Brooke, if you're able to mute when people come in, that would be great. Thank you. The other C, I'm cheating a little because I have two C's, is really to think about our ultimate goal, which is to build connections among community members and connections among families. And as we look at this, it's hard, to think about this, but I think about how stress and trauma often act as wedges between loving family members, between loving community members. And that what we have seen is that it's often the unspoken, that sometimes when things are unspoken in families or in communities, we trust each other less. And so one of our mantras in child-parent psychotherapy is that we speak the unspeakable. And that if you think about it, this is a very odd metaphor, but I often think about, us as plumbers, where the love is trying to flow through from one person to the other, and there's this massive clog in the way. And that by speaking the unspeakable, by beginning to kind of think about what we do together, we unclog it and the love flows, and we come back to this beautiful connection that we're seeking to build for families, for communities, for ourselves. So I want to thank you all for joining us to build connection. And as we come to this triangle, one of the experiences that we were focusing on is coronavirus, that we are going through coronavirus. And when we think about it, we want to start by thinking what it means to your community. And one of the important things is thinking about proximity to danger. Because when we talk about trauma, it's really about the sense of impinging danger. And so here we have an image of Bronfenbrenner. He taught us that a child lives in embedded context. They live in families, communities, and in a larger society. And you can see that I have this red coronavirus right there. And I want to think about proximity to danger, because when the virus was in another country, we might not have felt its proximity to danger. And then as it gets closer to our communities, we feel it. And even when I say community, we live in different communities. You live in different counties. We have different cultural groups. We know that Indigenous cultural groups have been disproportionately affected, as have Black African American families. Certain communities are more affected. Families where people have to work that are affected by poverty, We know that in the meat and poultry industry, they're also disproportionately affected, so they have more proximity to danger. So what this means is even when we're talking about coronavirus, it's not the same danger for all of us. And it's really layered on top of our past experiences, so that we think about how this may remind us of recent stress and trauma, how it might remind us of our family's stress and trauma, and how it might remind us of our cultural groups' historical stress and trauma. So one of the metaphors I hope you hold is that trauma is a lot like asthma, and that trauma reminders are kind of like pollen. And we know that with asthma, if you are in heavy pollen season, you're going to have worse symptoms. And the same is true for trauma. So for folks with a history of trauma, or folks whose cultural groups have a history of trauma, we're in heavy pollen season. Seeing things, feeling things in our bodies, those might be trauma reminders. And that those would very naturally make our symptoms return or get worse. And so if you are experiencing that, I just want to A, acknowledge, and B, breathe together and think about this and make the connection there. All right. So before we get to the story, I know we're here to honor the triangle, and I really wanted to connect it to the idea that we know in infant mental health that how a parent is doing affects how an infant is doing. And so we hold the idea of the intergenerational transmission of trauma, and also for cultural groups, that cultural groups have an experience that affects how they do and how they socialize and raise children. And that we need a plan for helping children, a plan for helping caregivers, and a plan for addressing what is happening in our society. And so I just wanted to begin by really bringing us to the cultural group triangle. And I know that maybe that's not what people said we were going to come here to do today originally, but it feels like it is so important to start with that A, acknowledge that we do in the United States have a cultural group history of genocide, slavery, colonization, forced family separations, mass incarceration, and so much more. And that some of what we might see, racism, systemic oppression, and avoidance of pain, is unfortunately the behaviors and the consequences of potentially that history and much more. And so it will be important that we think about our plan. And if you look at this, the A, acknowledge. The idea of feeling. We hear the words of Dan Siegel that to heal it, you've got to feel it. Selma Freiberg, in our kind of legacy of infant mental health, taught us what will predict whether a parent repeats the harmful past that they've experienced with the next generation. It's really the parent's ability to acknowledge and to feel the pain that they had in childhood. Because so many people have difficult histories, have many ACEs, as we might hear about, but they don't repeat. And so if we hold that lesson true for parents, then we might hold it also for systems. That when we can recognize and feel our own systems and make meaning of our country's history and lean into the pain and do something different, that's when we'll break the cycle. So let's just begin. We're going to begin again, but we're going to go to the story. And I just wanted to go back to the breath. And so if you want to, never do anything you don't want to, even if I say it's for regulation, because if you don't want to do it, it's not regulating. But go ahead and put one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. And just gently feel that space that it creates in between there. Breathing in. You should feel your belly rise and out. Trying to breathe nice and slow out, so your exhales are longer than your inhales. And at your own rhythm, in and out. Continue breathing with an awareness of whatever you're feeling, it's okay. And just holding yourself. I'm imagining that as providers, you've been caring so much, and as parents. And so just taking a moment to sink into your bodies. And if you'd like to switch your body positions, you can with me. I'm going to put one head on the front of my forehead, and one on the back. And I'm just going to hold my mind as I breathe in and out. And I'm thinking about how much I might be holding cognitively, but also about making space. And it might feel odd that when our hands move in different places in our bodies, we feel different things. And if you want, just go back and put them where you want them, breathing in and out. And one thing I also like to do is to go ahead and, if you want, give yourself a little hug. You know, that for some, hugs have been in short supply. And I'm imagining that I'm sending this hug to all of you as well, in gratitude for your presence and for being here to really acknowledge and change the lives of the families of your own and your community. So just beginning with some gratitude. All right, so continue to breathe, and I'm going to put the story up. And we're going to read the story together so that we have a joint experience of the story. And I'm going to read the story as we go through, and then we'll just sort of take a moment and think about it. Think about the lessons learned through the story and where it takes us. So fighting the big virus, Trinka, Sam, and Littletown work together. And I'd like to acknowledge my co-author, Melissa Breimer, and the illustrator, Eric Gibbon Jr. And that we dedicate this story to the children of the world and all the frontline workers, that they are in our hearts. This is Trinka, and this is Sam. They're neighbors, and they like to play together. In the spring, they run outside and welcome the flowers. And when it rains, they love to go puddle stumping. And they always listen when it's time to stop. Well, almost always. Come on, Sam. Coming. Trinka, let's go. But it's so much fun. One day while they were watching TV at Sam's house, they heard about an illness that was spreading and making lots of people sick. The grown-ups on TV were worried. Trinka and Sam were worried too. Even Sam's baby brother, Cal, and their pet Juju seemed to know that something scary was happening. A few days later, they saw people wearing masks on their faces. They didn't understand why. They saw people buying lots of groceries, and sometimes the things they wanted weren't in the store. That was strange. That night, Trinka and Sam asked their parents lots of questions and talked to them about their worries. Their parents listened carefully. Then they helped them understand why people were worried about this big virus and what they could do to stay safe. What is corona? Well, that's a good question. Are you going to get sick? Will I get sick? We hope not. We're doing lots of things to help keep ourselves healthy. Even if we get sick, most people get well. Trinka and Sam felt a lot better after talking to their parents. Even though the virus was still in Littletown, it was good to share their worries and think about all the good things their family and town were doing to stay safe. As the virus continued to spread, their lives changed in many ways. Sam couldn't go to school. He missed his teacher and his friends. He wondered when he would see them again. Trinka's mom tried to teach her things. Sometimes that went well, and other times both Trinka and her mom ended up feeling very frustrated. Trinka and Sam wanted to play with each other, but they couldn't. They could wave at each other and play rock, paper, scissors from their doors, but it wasn't the same. They missed each other. They could go for walks outside, but the playground was closed. Trinka was upset. She wanted to play on the slide, but Officer Clemens said they had to close the playground to keep the virus from spreading. By closing the playground, they were working together to stay safe. When they went to the cheese store, they had to wait in a long line. Trinka's mom explained that they did this to make sure the store wasn't crowded. This made things safer for the workers and everyone who went to the store. Waiting was boring, but it wasn't all bad. They met a really nice lady, Mrs. Whisk. She played red light, green light with Trinka and her mom. Pretty soon the whole line was playing. It made the time go much faster, and it was nice to make new friends. Mrs. Whisk was buying cheese to make a cheesecake. She couldn't see her grandchildren right now, but that afternoon, they were going to bake together by video. When she learned that Trinka loved cheesecake, she shared her secret recipe with them. Ooh, I love cheesecake. I'll tell you how I make it. I guess we'll get extra cheese so we can make cheesecake too. Whoopee! Yay! It was hard to have to stay inside and not be able to do the things they usually did. Each family tried to do fun things to make the time pass. Trinka and her mom played lots of games. Oh, and of course, they made the cheesecake following Mrs. Whisk's secret recipe, and they decided to share the love and make one for Sam's family too. Sam and his family planted seeds and watched them grow. I'm going to give one to Trinka. What a great idea. They also played lots of hide and seek. Cal loved hide and seek, even though he wasn't so good at hiding. I wonder where Cal is. The families had good times, but they also had hard times. There were days full of tears and times when Trinka wouldn't listen. There were times when Trinka needed her mom, but her mom was busy trying to take care of so many things. Hold me, Mama. Mama, Mama, Mama. I have to work. I have to clean. Okay, I see you need me. There was the time when Trinka's mom had an important call. She told Trinka that she needed to play by herself. Mr. Finkel, you can't come over now. We're still friends, but there's this mean virus. Juju, Mom still loves us. She's on an important call and we have to wait. Trinka tried to listen and follow directions, but it was hard to wait. She and Juju decided to see what her mom was doing. Her mom was not happy about this. Mom, Mr. Finkel and Juju want to show you what they made. Trinka, I told you I had an important call. Trinka's mom took time to calm down. Then they talked about what happened, how they both felt, and they made a plan. Together they drew signs that Trinka's mom could put up when she was busy. I know it's hard. Sometimes mommies have to take care of important things. Let's think about what we can do. Green light means I can ask you a question, but I have to be quiet. Yellow means careful, because you're kind of busy. And red means I really need to try to wait. Trinka mostly followed the signs, but it was hard when she wanted her mommy. Mom, are you done yet? I am so sorry. That's okay. It's happening to all of us. Family comes first. At Sam's house, they were also having problems. There were times when everyone was in a bad mood. Sometimes the grown-ups were mad at each other. Sam and Cal did not like it when this happened. They were worried. Sam got mad too. It was hard to understand why things were so different. Why can't I go to school? I know I explained this before. His parents tried to be patient, but when Sam misbehaved, they sometimes didn't know what to do. He took his brother's toy, he slammed the door, he didn't listen to his dad. After Sam misbehaved, he felt bad. His parents felt bad too. They knew that everyone was under pressure and they all needed help, so they thought about different things that they could do. They talked about how they were feeling inside their bodies. They ran around to get the icky out, to have fun, and to help everyone to feel a little better. They helped each other get some alone time so they would have more energy and patience. They read books to talk about their feelings. All over Littletown, families were worried for different reasons. Some knew people who were sick, others worried about jobs because businesses were closing. Even though the kids were little, they knew things were happening. Sam's mom worked in a hospital caring for people who needed help. They were proud of the work she did, but they also worried about her. She told them about the different ways that she kept herself safe from the virus. She also told them that if the virus spread more, she might need to stay somewhere else. Because of her job, she was around lots of people who had the virus. She wanted to help people, but she also wanted to keep her family safe. Sam knew that his mommy was very brave, and he wanted to be brave too. But it was hard. I'm going to be real sad. Yep, me too. We're making a plan just in case. If I go away, I'll come back home as soon as I can. And you can see how she and her colleagues are talking about what they're doing to keep their families safe. Sam and baby Cal didn't like it when their mom went to work, but their dad was there for them. Their mom called them from the hospital. Even though she wasn't with them, they were always in her heart. Look, Mom, I drew a picture of you. Hello, sweet boys, I love you. For the parents, it really helped when they could talk to each other and get support. They were all juggling so many things. They talked about hard things and they shared funny stories that made them laugh and realized they weren't alone. They also shared recipes and good ideas for things to do with kids. They found they could be together even while keeping physical space between them. How's it been at your place? We're glad to be together, but it's been stressful. Working while caring for kids is hard. I was in the middle of a call when Sam burst in crying because Cal broke his toy, and Cal announces he made a poop in his diaper. At first, I was so embarrassed, but the people on the call were so cool about it. They said we should take bets on who would have the next diaper change during the call. All over Littletown, families did things to keep their community safe from the virus. They supported each other and found ways to help the kids. We're going to the store. Can we get you anything? That's so kind of you. Look, Mom, Sam drew me a picture. They spent time together and tried to get back to simple routines like making food and eating together. Big families ate together, and so did small ones. They tried to have regular schedules, and they found new things to do that they liked to do together. They found ways to reduce their stress. They danced and exercised a lot. They thought about when to watch the news and when to turn it off. Mom, what's happening? I think we know about this. Let's turn it off. They gave each other big hugs. They talked about their feelings and figured out what they could do when they were feeling sad, angry, frustrated, embarrassed, or ashamed. They found moments of joy, calm, and victory. They were sad about missing special events like graduations and family birthdays, and they found new ways to celebrate. It wasn't the same, but it was beautiful and important. They helped others, and we can see up top they're helping someone get food. Good morning. Thank you. This really helps. And even Trinka is helping. I'm going to put these in the window and send one to Nana. And people were sewing face masks. And they clapped and sang. Even though they were in different places, they were together. It would take some time. While they waited, they were grateful for everyone who helped those who were sick, for farmers who grew the food, for those who made sure stores had food and packages were delivered, for teachers who helped them learn and scientists who worked hard to stop the spread of the illness, for leaders who tried to make sure that people were taken care of, for the many people who were kind and helpful. And we can see the leader at the top. She's saying, we're so grateful to all the workers on the front line. We need to work together to ensure that all are cared for. And the scientists are talking. Thank you for sharing your data. I think we're getting closer to having a vaccine. And Sam is talking to his class. Hi, Piplo. Teacher Chris, where are you? Hi, class. I'm at home, just like you. I'm so glad to see you. I can see that you all brought a stuffy that we can meet. They were also grateful for the many people who stayed at home and couldn't work. Piplo's family was worried about their jobs and having enough money for rent and food. Yet they stayed in to keep Littletown safe, to make sure the hospitals didn't have too many sick people and the virus couldn't spread too fast. They were also heroes. Oh, Piplo, we've all been so upset. I'm sorry. We can't work, so we're worried about money. We can't get a lot of things right now, like special treats. I know we don't like to ask for help, but Sam's family wants to help us. I think you're right. We need help. Things are hard right now, and we're here for you. We love you so much. Little by little, things started getting better. Scientists found ways to test for the virus. They developed treatments. Thanks to a partnership of scientists from all around the world, we've made progress developing treatments for coronavirus. Kids went back to school. Parents went back to work. They followed the new rules for staying safe and worked together to fight the virus. It's so good to see you all. Welcome back to school. It would take a while. They would have times when they would need to listen carefully and follow the rules to keep everyone safe from the virus. There would be many changes, but eventually they would all go out to play. Look, Mom, we could play again. And there's some space where people can write good things their family is doing, and that we can think about all the helpers that we're grateful for, including all of you who are with us today, who are coming here to think about the mental health of families. All right. So we have a moment where really, as we look at this picture, we can think about the importance of grown-ups coming together, sharing their thoughts and their emotions, getting support. Think about supporting the caregivers so that they can support the children. And we want to support the providers so you can support the families. So I'm just going to take a moment and going to do a little experiment. We're going to come off. It's lovely to see your faces. We're going to come onto the larger screen. I am going to remind you guys that we are recording this. And so but I would love it if you guys either in the chat or coming off mute, you can raise your hands, we can call you, and would share some of your thoughts of the story of what we've shared so far. What do you think the story teaches us? Where does it take you? So we're getting a lot of gratitude. I'm surprised by tearing up at a certain page. And this is a really awesome book. My twin 8-year-olds really enjoyed the book. Thank you. I was so surprised that the story told my story. It really honors listening to our feelings. It's an awesome book. It's calming and real. I didn't expect the story to make me emotional. And the emotions are okay, right? So it's hard to feel it. And I recognized that when I made the abrupt transition to the story, I was like, oh, I should have maybe asked us all to be present. And yet I think this is what this moment is about. It's about feeling it. It's about even feeling at times jarred when we're feeling certain feelings and then we're asked to work, right? It's like, oh, we're in the middle of multiple pandemics and we have to show up. I think the kids and families will be comforted by the ending. I know I was, yes. I think that's, we all want to see that, we come to another side, right? That there is hope. It is hard to address stress and trauma without addressing hope. So calming and validating of families' feelings throughout this difficult time. Yes. We need to keep the hope alive, that's true. And what I want you to do is to look out at the sea of faces who are with us. And I want you guys to think of us as candles, okay? That we are lighting the world and using our voices as forces for good. And we are addressing many viruses that have needed to be addressed and that have been with us as we do this. So many more folks turned on their camera. Thank you. It's nice to see each other, right? This is the connection, that when it's hard, to know that we may come from different places, but we are here to support each other. Love the connection and reminder that we're in this, living this, and have different roles and ways of dealing, and that they are all okay, and we and the children are not alone. Yes. I think any of us would be overwhelmed by the work that we have to do at so many levels, right? And the help and support. But if we look out at the sea of faces, and if you look out, these are your counties. Right? We have more people registered. But as we continue to do this work, how we lean in and how we feel it. And how I think I just also want to acknowledge that when we think about the virus of racism and the pain, how we center that pain and center those individuals who've been suffering and work as a community, as a protective shield to protect them, to keep them safe, and to acknowledge. So that we think about the suffering of those most affected by COVID, most affected by historical trauma and by racism. So you've captured all of the components, factors, feelings of the moment in the time that we're going through. Thank you. Very moving. I love that it normalizes that it's okay as parents and children to feel frustrated and to be able to talk about that and why, and then coming up with plans that help. I want to thank you for that comment, Angelica, because I think really we want to start with the feelings, right? And the acknowledgement, that A, right? And that connection. And we don't want to get stuck, right? Because we have to have a plan, and kind of who has that plan. And it needs to be that bigger, wiser, stronger kind, right? From Circle of Security. Who is bigger, wiser, stronger kind? As parents, we strive to be bigger, wiser, stronger kind. And as community members, we also need to do that. Ditto to that on normalizing the feelings. Yes, because if you think that there's something wrong with you because you're having these feelings, then you carry the burden of shame and blame, right? And like, it's just like working through trauma, intergenerational trauma and historical trauma is a nightmare all by itself, let alone if you want to compound that with a little shame and blame, right? So as we lean into this, really to say it makes sense that people are feeling this way. It makes sense that they've been holding this pain. This is justifiable pain, justifiable anger, justifiable sadness. So it's not about coping it away. It's about holding it and not getting stuck there. Because if we feel stuck in those feelings, then we can't kind of lean in and engage. All right. So are the characters rats? It's the Chinese ear of the rat. Well, they're mice. There's a little backstory to that, actually. When I was very little, oddly, I didn't have dolls, but these little dressed up mice. I don't know why. So when I had to write a story, they were part of my childhood. So they came. They're little mice. I want to thank you all. I'm going to return to some of the slides just in case they're helpful for you and your community. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Okay, but we will end together as well. Okay, so hopefully you are now seeing the slides that we shared some of our thoughts about the story. And I hope that if you're using it in community or in families, that we start this way, where the adults really start. And we start and we share what this means to us. And then we think about what are some of our takeaways. And one of the takeaways, it's funny that they're mice and that they have big ears, because little kids have big ears, and that they're always watching us. And I hope that the story helps us all to see that children are watching. And I think people would say even when they're little, and we would say no, especially when they're little. Because when they're little, we are their world. So they notice and they have many, many questions. And they also have many behaviors. And those behaviors, let's just all get real about it. They're frustrating, right? They're especially frustrating when we're stuck in the house and we can't get out. Nobody wants to be with a tantrum 24/7. And yet we know it as infant mental health providers that behavior is communication, that it means something. And if we go back to that idea of connecting, we think about, on the right-hand side, we have the behaviors that are bringing us down. And what is the experience that has brought them here, right? And what would be our plan? Remembering, of course, the protective steps and hope. So if we take this and we think about that experience side and the sources of stress in the story, we can think about needing food. So many families have lost their jobs, need food, thinking about which communities are providing that or not. Many families, like Sam's family, are at work-related risk for COVID. Other families, because they have to work and where they're working, are they given enough protective gear? People, we miss people, we feel alone. That's another source of stress, feeling isolated. Worries about finances and money being so real. Worries about illness. And this can be both about physical illness or emotional illness, that we're seeing a lot of people who've had histories of depression or manic depression, and the additional stress really puts us back in that and makes us more at risk. And so just thinking about whether it's your own or for a family member, that's another source of stress. And the children are aware of these sources of stress. And just thinking about school-related stress and conflict between us, between parents and children, the need to attend a family while working at the same time, not being able to do activities that you do. And here, actually, it's very interesting that I have the police there when I wrote the story. I had no idea how many meanings this picture might carry for different families. But just think about what it means when someone says, no, you can't do this, you can't protest, you can't use your voice, another source of stress. Or do they join you? Or do they support you? What happens? So it becomes community together. And all of this, when we think about the conflict between the adults, I just want to say that we could have started there, but it really makes sense to look at it as resulting from all of this, resulting from the previous page, that it makes sense that unfortunately, when we have feelings, sometimes they spill over to other people. And then the children watch. And so as we return and we think about Sam and we think about those behaviors and those things that he's doing, yes, it is hard. And it makes sense, because this is what Sam is watching. It makes sense that his parents are suffering. His mom isn't, working in a hospital. And so there's a lot of stress. And we really don't want to get stuck there, but when we think about what's our plan, how do we help? Remember that we want to start off with acknowledge. Acknowledge, yes, Sam, not ideal. Don't want to be slamming the doors. Don't want to be doing this. And stuff is hard. It's that and, right? It's not like it's okay to do that. So if you noticed, I took a deep breath because before I make a plan, I'm going to want to make that connection and acknowledge and then think, okay, so what will we do? So let's not get stuck. And so within the story, I think we can see that one of the ways that we don't get stuck is we really pay attention to what we would call fundamental regulatory activities, just fancy names for do the stuff that makes you feel whole. Do the stuff that you have to do every day. And one of them is really talking about and learning about feelings. And I know that it's odd that I describe that as fundamental because in so many cultural groups, including mine, that's not where we start. Maybe that wasn't normal. And yet it's really important to be aware of what's going on in your gut. And I think we might do that through ritual. We might do that through song. We might do that through coming together. But in many traditional ways we have of being with our feelings. Could be with a feeling chart, could be in many other ways. But it's important to think about our fundamental regulation of sleeping well, of eating well, of having some type of predictable routines when you can't control anything. And I think about predictable but flexible. So we're not rigid, but we are saying, hey, there's some things you can expect. The world is turned upside down and there's some things that you can expect. You can expect your story. And we have to move our bodies. We know that when we're under conditions of stress, that our bodies produce chemicals and that those chemicals are actually designed to protect us. They're designed to help us to run or to help us to fight. And that fighting is often a really good thing to do when bad things happen. And yet if we're not moving, if we're not active, if we're not taking action, those chemicals reside in our body. And we know that cortisol in high doses is toxic to our neurobiology and that it can affect us. So it's critical that we move and critical that we move many times a day in the ways that you want to. So Brooke, if you're able to mute people, that would be great. And then just thinking about another way that we regulate is by sharing hugs so that we connect. And that actually also, that idea of tending and befriending, that helps us to regulate. So when we can, feeling connected or even putting on our videos and talking in community like we did, that collective sigh that we are together. It's sort of a virtual hug when we can't have a real one. And then just thinking about other things that help. Staying connected. You can see here that they're chatting through video just like we did, playing together. Very importantly, doing new things and feeling competent. One of the core trauma concepts is that trauma robs you of your sense of competence. Because when you're in a state of trauma, you typically can't do something. You want to do something. You want to make it stop, which is why action is often the antidote to trauma, if you can take action. But often the safest action is to do nothing, so that feeling gets stuck in your body. But even for kids, doing something and feeling competent, even in this moment. And helping others, right, also helps us, as you see Trinka sort of making that. And I want to say that when you look at these pictures of the parents connecting with the kids, these are what we call angel moments, right? They're moments of deep connection, and that even in a pandemic, even in a dual pandemic, our kids will remember not just the pandemic. They'll remember the ways we showed up for them. They may remember the plants that we grew, and that those stories will become part of the intergenerational legacy of our family, the games we played, the things that we learned together. And even as community members, we see Mrs. Whisk down there, and she has a very brief interaction with Trinka, and yet it is memorable, and it shows you that our beloved community cares for each other, that those momentary interactions that we have when we connect with one another, they matter. And that, as we saw in Italy, and as that so many communities have replicated, it is critical that we come together to show that we are united, because that helps. Whether it is united in a screen like this, or with our neighbors next door, or clapping, or knowing that as a world, we are marching and we will do more. That is important. And as we think that what helps, we also need to think about how do we reduce stress and enhance regulation. And so we can see Sam's dad reading books about feelings, thinking about when we reduce stress by turning off the news, and when we decide that we need to watch, when we turn it off because, we have to do something else. And then how we recognize that the conflict, remember that acknowledge. So if there is conflict, it is unfortunate, and it may be a result of so much stress. And we need to recognize how the conflict affects each member of the family. We need to make a plan, which may involve getting some alone time so we can have more energy and patience to show up. We need to get support and help from our neighbors, from our community members, from our helpers in our community, from our parents. And we need to make plans for how we reduce stress. So let's turn just briefly to how we use the story with children. Just some simple guidelines. Start with the parents, right? And then as we turn to using the story, we want to think about what is our main goal. And let me just say, as the author of many children's stories, my main goal is never that you just read the story. My main goal is the story is a tool for having a conversation. And if you want to privilege anything, privilege the conversation. So it's an opportunity to think about what children share, what their thoughts are, how we dialogue as family members, to let children share what they're holding inside them. I think of children often as like, sometimes when things are rough, that they hold little volcanoes inside them, right? And that those volcanoes are trying to keep them inside. And if you hold a volcano in your belly, that's going to affect your health, right? Like, who wants to be living with burning lava inside them? And then unfortunately, sometimes it explodes. And so a story or having your parent, it's an opportunity to share your volcano, whether it shows up as fear and frustration or, really that sadness, whether it's a deep, blue, cold, icy volcano that drags you down. But this idea that what is shareable is bearable. So books open doors to conversations that let you share things. And that we want to let our children's responses guide us. That is our truest compass. One of the concepts and core ideas that might help us, I know the picture seems a little weird, but think of your body as a cup. And really think about, what can you hold? What can you tolerate? What does your body hold? And that what we know is that stress and trauma causes our bodies and our cups to fill, because stress and trauma cause strong emotions like anger, fear, and sadness. And that those feelings also interfere with our ability to feel calm and whole in our bodies. And that when we've had it up to here, it's also really hard to regulate. And what we know, if you look at the little cup, is that little kids have tiny bodies, and they're sort of developing their capacity to hold feelings, and they need our help. But it's so hard for them to hold these challenging feelings and know what to do when they have them. And so what I mean by this is, for some children, when you open a page to a book, any book, a book with two parents in it, it fills their cup, because that's not their story, because it's a trigger. Remember, trauma is a little bit like asthma. It's pollen for them. So it doesn't mean that the book is toxic or bad, but what it means is it brought up feelings. And for that particular child, they may need to wander. They may need to move. They may need to regulate. And what we need to say is, it makes sense, because the book has signals of danger for this child, and they need a grown-up to lovingly hold them. Not to let them avoid, but to let them grow their cups. And what we're saying to them when we let them look at a page of a book and then wander away, which is so funny because in schools we often don't let kids wander away. But for this, when we're thinking about stress and trauma, we want you to be able to wander away, because what we're saying is you don't have to get stuck in a feeling. We're saying you can look at this, it can bring up feelings, and then we don't have to stay there. And what's interesting is some kids who say, nope, don't want to do it, they come back and they pull things off shelves. And later on they say no. They say, I don't want to do this. And then they say, can I take this home? That's what a therapist said. She said, the kid said, I don't like this book. And then at the end of the session, they said, can we take that home? And so how do we understand that? That there's, really an approach avoidance. I want to talk about my pain, but my pain burns me. I want to talk about my pain, but my pain burns me. So how do we just go in just a little bit so that we can say, within the context of our relationship, within the loving arms of your parent, we don't have to get stuck, and you can do this. So one of the ways that you can do this is to use it as a coloring book. Coloring is fun and relaxing. It adds an added element. It lets kids go at their own speed. I know that we often have rules about books, like you don't scribble on your books, but here I would say, yes, we do scribble on our books, and we can use colors to scribble. So if there's a page that makes you mad, or an illustration, go ahead, pick a color for anger. And I often use red, scribble all over it, or not, let the kid be your guide. You can pick a color for sadness, one for, oops, I left some in Spanish. How funny. I'd done this presentation first in Spanish. One for miedo, for sadness. One for alegría, for happiness. And you can color and you can talk at the same time. You can use the story to talk about your family's experiences, and children may come back to certain pages, the good moments, the challenges, ways your family is supporting your community, ways your community is supporting your family, or ways you wish they would. You can really use the story to think about Piplo's family as well. And to think about in this picture, children recognize when we're worried. They feel our stress, and so they need our help. The idea that if they see that we're worried and they know this, we think about what is shareable is bearable, because it is hard to feel the pain without having somebody holding you and helping you to make meaning. And so that is something that as grown-ups we can do. And we can help them to think about, what do we do when we're angry? What do we do when we're this angry? What do we do when we're this sad? And maybe we're doing something different than we've traditionally done. And that one thing that we want to lean into is that idea of connection and safety in the spheres that we control, having those pockets of safety and love. Now, before we move and leave and adjourn, I just wanted to say there is also a companion booklet. Parents can choose to use it. You can choose to use it. It's also a coloring book. And it just has simple questions that kids might have. And what we're suggesting is that you look at it first to know how you think about the questions and the answers you might give. You can intersperse it in the book or not. But things like, kids have questions about viruses and how they spread. They might have questions specifically about coronavirus. I know there's a lot of words here because we have a lot to learn about coronavirus. They might have questions about what happens when people go to the hospital. And unfortunately, as we recognize that 100,000 people have died and that communities have been disproportionately affected, they might have questions about death. And just our ability to recognize that, we say the story grows as the child grows, but also it's important that we provide them with the answers to their questions. And unfortunately, when they have experiences, they often have questions we wish they didn't have. So as we think about what might help in our ending, I would just want to acknowledge that we all might need different things, right? So we can borrow ideas from others, but if it doesn't work for you, that's okay. Figure out what works to you. And we always start in our work with protective steps and hope. We think about what you're doing. We make a note of those good things. You showed up today. That is awesome. And you're connecting with each other. And the families that you partner with, they do the same thing. And I just really want to make a plug for making sure that we take good care of our bodies, that we move to release stress. I personally am doing Bollywood dancing. And I say that if we ever have a live training, I will send you out the links to my video, and anyone who wants to dance with me or share a dance with me, we will do it together. We will have an infant mental health flash mob as we dance together. And so let's think about what else might work, and let's think about what else we need to do as community members and as a society. So I just want to thank you. I'll be posting, I think we'll both be emailing you the slides, but also all the resources from today, as well as the links from today's webinar if I was successful in recording. Will be going up on piploproductions.com and on our Child Parent Psychotherapy website. Barbara will be posting it on their Facebook page, I imagine, as well, so that we will make sure to make this available to you and to your community members.
Chandra, there's a few questions about whether or not there's a recording of the Spanish version, or if you could share those slides.
There's a recording of the Spanish version. It's actually up on the website, piploproductions.com. And so you can go there and watch it. I did it for Puerto Rico. And I did it a couple weeks ago. So it's up there. It was part of another webinar that was done for Puerto Rico. There's also an audio version in Spanish by my colleague, Luis Flores, who read the book. So I wanted to do something fun for you, I hope, as I wanted to quickly read a book that I wrote as a little shot of hope. And we'll be raffling off a copy of that book as one of our raffles. But this way it'll also be audio recorded so that you can share that as well. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, and then we'll quickly read this book, and then we will, and then we'll stop. Okay, Holdin, Pott. Good day, my name's Mr. Holdin Pott, and I was taught that you got what you got. And when the heat is turned on hot, do not let it show. Because all those feelings that start to bubble, they will surely cause you trouble, unless your lid is on real tight and you hold it on with all your might. Sadness, anger, I keep them inside. Along with tears, I never cried. At times I fear I'll overflow, but that's my way, it's what I know. Little Pot watched and tried to be brave. Little Pot listened and tried to behave. But there were so many things Little Pot never told. Too many things for a Little Pot to hold. All by himself, pushed off a shelf, called dirty and dented by others who meant it. And all this made the stew thicken, lid quake and heartbeat quicken, body ache and belly sicken.
Chandra, are you supposed to be screen sharing or not?
Oh, yes. Am I not screen sharing?
You're not screen sharing.
Oh, no. Okay. So what would you like me to do? Should I go back and start it over? All right. I'm screen sharing. I'm going to start it over. That way you guys will have the recording with the pictures. It's not ideal, but I'm going to do
Sorry, that took me a minute to catch. I was responding to some chats.
Okay. So now can you see it, Brooke? Okay.
Yes.
All right, good. All right. So Holdin Pott times 2. We'll edit that out for the recording. Good day. My name's Mr. Holdin Pott. I was taught that you got what you got. And when the heat is turned on hot, do not let it show. 'Cause all those feelings that start to bubble, they will surely cause you trouble, unless your lid is on real tight and you hold it on with all your might. Sadness, anger, I keep them inside. Along with tears, I never cried. At times I fear I'll overflow, but that's my way, it's what I know. Little Pot watched and tried to behave. Little Pot listened and tried to behave. But there were so many things Little Pot never told. Too many things for a Little Pot to hold. All by himself, pushed off a shelf, called dirty and dented by others who meant it. And all this made the stew thicken, lid quake and heartbeat quicken, body ache and belly sicken. Little Pot could not know what to do. So do you know what he did? He blew. Then Little Pot felt ashamed and afraid he'd be in big trouble for the mess that he made. But this time was different, for when he blew, Holdin Pott saw him and Holdin Pott knew. The rumbling volcano he'd learned to contain, he'd held for too long that feeling of pain. So he went quickly, took Little Pot by the hand, held him real tight and said, I understand. You're feeling alone, you're burning inside, but I am right here, I'm right by your side. And if you are hurting and needing to scream, let's open your lid and let off some steam. Let's turn down the heat so you don't feel so hot. For you are my precious, my love Little Pot. And in the warmth of Holdin's love and embrace, tears started dripping down Little Pot's face. Little Pot felt so loved and was now not alone. For in Holdin Pot's arms, he found safety and home. Now, the other Pots watched and knew what is true, that Pots who tease need Holdin too. So all of us big Pots, we know what to do. So I want to thank you all for being big Pots to so many people, for holding so much, and for holding yourselves. Let's make sure to give ourselves good hugs. So I know that I went a little past time because I messed up with my share screening. Thank you for staying with us. We'll edit out the mess that people don't see that. I am here if there are questions or comments. Oh, Brooke, you're going to be doing the raffle, right? So we're going to raffle 3 winners, 1 for the story, 1 for a poster, and 1 for a CPP face mask. And thank you for putting things on the chat. Thank you so much. More webinars like this, please. They will be sending a brief survey to all of you guys who registered so you can really request. We have the capacity to support you and to support your counties. Yes, I love that breathe. Yes. Also, I want to encourage the adults in my families to remember to do the stuff that makes them whole. So hard to get self-time, and when you have children, especially for single parents right now. Yes. And as the pandemic continues, we're going to have to figure out as community members how to support those single parents as well. Thank you. And thank you all for the gratitude for the presentation and the gratitude for the connection. Thank you for coming. Brooke, I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can do the raffle or announce our winners. Or did you want people to write something in the chat? Do you want to come off and mute? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just share a word or a phrase what you're going to take away from today. And if I don't have your email address, I should have your email address if you registered. If not, please just private message me or post it in the chat. And then I'll just go through and select raffle winners after this. I also just wanted to say we will be having another webinar on June 16th with Dr. Alicia Lieberman. And the title of that webinar is Listening to Children's Fears, COVID as an Aid to Empathy. So I will be blasting that out to all of you as well. And thank you for our Lake County partners for hosting that. Is that it, Barbara?
Yes, Chandra, I want to thank you on behalf of everybody. You have a masterful way of teaching us about trauma and early childhood, what little children need, and doing it, reminding us of how story is really so important. You do it in such a brilliant way. Your Piplo characters live in my mind as really such a wonderful way to show us about feelings and what people need. So thank you really very much. And thank everyone who joined us on the webinar today. We're really excited to be partnering with you in your communities, in your counties. And I really love that we have a cross sector here from so many counties north of us, and recognizing that your experience is different from our experience, but we've really so enjoyed joining you and learning about your community. So thank you all for coming on. I hope we see you again in a few weeks. And Chandra, thank you again.
Thank you all. So write your comments in the chat and Brooke will choose 3 raffle winners. And just one, you can just write a single word for where you're at. Feeling connected, breathe. Yes. Connection, breathe. Oops, thank you. Grateful, connect. Yes, I was glad to see that there are stories dealing with other difficulties. There are lots of stories on piploproductions.com. Check it out. Most of them have free PDFs. On the 1st of every month, the Kindle versions are free. You don't need a Kindle to use them. You can be a carrier of racism without knowing it. I love the ABCs. Love it. Glad you'll be sharing the story with families. Love the allergy metaphor. It's okay to have a roller coaster of emotions, yeah? We just don't want anyone to get stuck on it, right? We're going on and off a roller coaster. Yep, go ahead and pick the winners, Brooke. You ready?
Sure, let's see. How about, I'm just gonna randomly pick people.
So is this for the face mask or the poster? Are you gonna say what they're winning? So we have poster, face mask, and book.
All right, so Kara McKinney says not alone. And would you like a face mask, Kara? And then Lisa McLaughlin says heard, and we'll send her the Holdin Pott book. And how about Breathe from Lynette? Or what was the other thing we were
The poster.
The poster.
All right. Thank you all so much.
Again, if I don't have your email, just PM, private message your email.
Because Brooke will need your address for our winners. So we look forward to seeing you at other trainings. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Take good care.